Everybody, it's Veronica Morris, and one of my favorite people down in San Diego, maybe of all time, and Chris Curcio. So Chris is a good friend, but I met him in San Diego. Now, this guy was a trial attorney in New York. I mean, just introduce yourself so they hear you.
Hi, everybody. How you doing?
Yeah, exactly. Now, this guy was a trial attorney in New York. He comes to San Diego and he revamps his life. And I'm assuming, I mean, you're probably just over the crazy life of that in New York, right?
Yeah, I was over practicing law and I had gotten into real estate, and the guys who got me into it were all based in San Diego. So that's how I ended up out here.
Oh yeah. So I meat him when I'm actually working down there. As I call myself a baby realtor, and I'm sorry, like some people at first might just think that Chris is an asshole, just the way that he presents himself.
Not even at first. Sometimes I never get over it.
But honestly, like there was just something about, I don't know what connected us, but we were like, you know what? You're straight to the point. I'm straight to the point. I think we're gonna get along okay.
Birds of a feather. You know what I mean? So,
Exactly. So he and I are kind of, we're working not on the same team, but just in the same industry. And so Chris was a part of a huge, huge team, the Pete Knows PB team. Now he started being the manager. And then tell me, like, what volume were you guys doing at the time?
we did in the last year that I was there with the team, we did over 150 million in sales volume.
150 million in sales volume. And this isn't some huge team. I don't know how many actual producers were on the team, maybe 4 or 5.
Yeah, I mean, we had the team had grown quite large, but it was a handful of the team that was doing the overwhelming majority of the production.
Yeah. So you have a very prominent $150 million volume team down in San Diego doing real estate. And when I was in town, this was and maybe it was just because I was newer to the business, but it felt to me, and you can, correct me if I'm wrong, that, I saw Compass start to come in, right? And Compass was, and Chris, we're not talking bad about companies on this one, okay?
Would I do that?
Well, maybe, but we're not going to talk
No,
about that. I'm sharing my
no.
experience, but
Positive California vibes today. That's all it is.
I love it. It's a little different than New York. Who you are anymore. So anyways, I'm in San Diego. And this is, I feel like when I was there, it was kind of when Compass started really coming into play. And what they were doing, in my opinion, is that they were essentially, to build their business, I think I don't even know if they had an office in La Jolla yet. They were starting to essentially give money, bring agents over to the Compass, and they were paying them to do so. Okay. And
Right.
that's what I was hearing. We were at Coldwell Banker, and, a couple $100,000 to this agent, a couple $100,000 to this agent to come over to Compass. Now, I know that, obviously having a $150 million volume team, am I allowed to say, I think the number, are you allowed to say how much Compass offered the team to go over
It
there?
was pretty well into seven figures.
Pretty well into 7 figures. So let's just say that, $1 million. Compass, again, we're not talking bad. Compass offered this team with Chris over $1 million to come over to their office and be part of their brokerage. And of all the things that they do, they shock everybody. They say, no, I'm going to turn down your $1 million. And they go to a company called eXp. Now, at the time, I want to say too, is that eXp had this, what? People would respond to that, or
Oh yeah.
they thought that eXp was small. It was what they call a recruiting team or a recruiting brokerage. But somehow this smart-ass trial attorney, ex-trial attorney, a team lead doing $150 million a year in sales, decide to go to eXp and turn down $1 million. So, Chris, you have to tell me what your guys' thoughts were, your what you researched, but tell us why you did that.
Sure. Yeah, it's that reaction was pretty common where people were like, WTF, what the hell are you guys doing? And um, I was very familiar with Compass because it's a New York based brokerage, and I know somebody who's been there since inception. So I was very familiar with them to begin with. And when they started really penetrating in La Jolla, I had no less than a dozen different agents from Compass. I'm the gatekeeper to Pete, so everybody's taking me out to lunch because they all want to be the ones to put our team in.
Mhm.
And every one of them is giving me the same story. It's, oh, I got 250,000, 300,000. We had friends who got 400,000. And the numbers were astronomical. And every single one of them is telling me it was two things that really got to me and that I started paying attention to. The one was they were saying it's only a 2-year non-compete.
Mhm.
And I was like, well, how the hell does that make any sense? And number two, everybody's like, oh my God, the technology's amazing. They have all this unbelievable tech. And I would just start to say, well, what is it? Like, what is the tech that you're referring to? And nobody was able to tell me. Like, nobody, I said, well, is it a CRM? Is it magic fairy dust? Like, what exactly are you talking about? And nobody could even ballpark it for me. So, after the first few meetings like this, I'm scratching my head saying, I don't understand how they're spending all this money. Then I started looking up whoever was taking me to lunch that day. I looked up their sales volume in advance. So I had an idea I could how much they were paying to their brokerage, like how much they were generating in company each year.
Mhm.
And from the time I started tracking it, and then I even went back to the first few, not one of them had ever even come close to making that much money in company dollar in a 2-year period.
Mhm.
So I'm just saying to myself, this doesn't make any sense.
Mhm.
So when they finally, when we were meeting with the actual reps from Compass itself, Pete had met with them initially, and then he brought me in on the subsequent meetings. And it was my very first question. I said, look, before you go into your whole dog and pony show here, I'm familiar with your company. I'm familiar with your business model. I don't understand how the hell you guys think you're sustainable.
Mhm.
And, these two poor kids, they were like two of the prettiest kids you've ever seen in your life, guy and a girl, both, super handsome, beautiful girl. And they had a script clearly, that they were supposed to be going by, and we ripped them off script in the first 5 minutes of the meeting.
Naturally, what
And
you
you know
do.
what I mean? So I'm like, look, I don't need all of that. I don't understand how you can possibly be doing business like this. And I'm hearing it all over the country because, we were really, we were looking and considering a move. We knew we had some value to provide, so we knew we'd be able to parlay this. Pete's been in the business for 30 years. You can't go anywhere in PB or La Jolla where they don't know who he is.
Yep.
So I'm like, well, we're going to parlay this right now. But it just didn't make any sense. And when, but all he kept saying was, we're betting on us, and it's the greatest company ever, and you're never going to want to leave here. And we're so excited. They had all their talking points.
Mhm.
So I finally just said, give me the number, and it was higher than I was anticipating.
Right.
So, pardon me. But I just looked at him and I was like, what's the catch? You know what I mean? Like, I don't like, I'm not some schmuck off the street. Like, you're offering us all this money. Why?
Mhm.
And he's like, well, we just know that this is going to be a lifelong partnership and this, that, and the other thing. And I was like, don't count on it, Junior. Like, you know what I mean? We go where the money is. So none of it made any sense. And they kept meeting with us and giving us the same story. And I finally said to them, look, just send us the contract. I want to see it. And when we finally got that, that's when we found out what the catch was.
Mhm.
And uh, yes, it's a 2-year non-compete. That's in big bold letters,
Mhm.
right? But what they don't tell us, um, and uh, the thing that really pissed me off, to be quite frank, was the 3-year clawback that they tried to bury into the fine print.
Mhm.
And what
And
that is,
and I'll just interrupt. I mean, we're not here to like bag on
no,
their company or your company.
no,
We know that it has some awesome opportunities, and it might be different in their part of the country of the contracts. But again, where does, I've always been very curious of what that was. And for them,
Right.
obviously it was different, and we'll go into why, they chose another company, but we're not bagging, but it is
Nope.
special from what they felt.
Nope, we can put that little disclaimer, like right here underneath me. Like this is why, if people are trying to understand why would you turn down all that money to
Yeah.
go to and choose a perceived unknown, this
Mhm.
is how it shook out.
Yeah.
And, so in addition to the 2-year non-compete, once that's done, that triggers a 3-year clawback where you're free to leave, but if you do, you have to give all the money back. And during that time, you are technically out of contract. So the company is free to renegotiate your splits, your franchise fee, and everything else. So, I'm like, well, what happens if during that time period you guys decide to reduce our commission split to 60/40? And they're like, oh, we wouldn't do that, blah, 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 blah. I was like, excellent. Put it in writing that our split's going to be 90/10 for the entire 5-year duration of this.
Mhm.
And they wouldn't do it. So, you know, long story short, we put the bullet in that deal. And I went back into Pete's office that night. My nickname became the Angry New Yorker, and this is like where it stemmed from. And it's probably 7:30 at night, and I slumped down in Pete's chair and I looked at him and I was like, well, now what? And he literally just laughed at me and said, don't worry, we were never going to go to Compass. And you can imagine what I'm looking at. I'm like, I don't know if you can bleep this, but you know what,
Yeah.
what the F are you talking about? And he says, I want to move the team to eXp. Well, if you were anywhere in the vicinity of La Jolla that night, you definitely could have seen the mushroom cloud that developed over his office when my head exploded. And I was like, what the fuck is eXp? What are you talking about? Like, I literally, I was shell shocked. It would have been because I had heard of it, but I didn't know a damn thing about it.
Yeah.
And I
We were hearing
couldn't.
negative. I would say we were hearing negative things about it for the most part.
I knew nothing about it. You know what I mean? I just knew it existed, but I had never heard a single person talk about it.
Mhm.
And I just was looking at him, and it was funny. We were talking about this recently. I was telling this story from stage once, and I was like, and we got into this big fight, and I'm like, actually, that's not true. I was in a big fight, and he was laughing at me and smiling the entire time. And he's like, do you trust me? Then I want you to watch this video tonight. So he emails me this link, and I'm driving home, and the whole time I'm like, I got to start looking at plan B here. Like, he's lost his mind. And literally I sit down and I took the biggest wine glass I had, filled it right to the brim. I mean, it was like a rom-com, the downward arc moment of sitting there with a giant glass of wine. And uh, I pressed play on this video, and it was a guy who I had personally never heard of before, but it turns out he was a monster at Keller Williams.
Mhm.
And right out of the gate, I sat up and I was like, all right, this is somebody I need to listen to, because this guy used to own 6 KW market centers and the rights to the territories, I believe, of Northern California and Hawaii. And he starts telling this story that when he first heard about eXp, he spoke directly with Glenn Sanford, the founder, and this is like early days of a couple hundred agents. And he went home that night and said to his wife, I'll never forget this as long as I live. And he says to his wife, if you knew that Netflix existed, would you own a Blockbuster? And she just looked at him like, of course not. Why? And he goes, we own 6 of them.
Yeah.
And he says that in the next 6 weeks, they sold all of their market centers and the rights to those 2 territories. And this guy was retirement age. You know what I mean? So he was set for life. He was already had a superstar career. And I'm like, all right, he's got huge cojones. I'm going to listen to this guy.
Mhm.
And within 10 minutes of him talking about the eXp model, I hit pause on the video, and I sat back and took like a giant swig of the wine. I was like, what am I missing here? Like, why is this the first time I'm hearing about this? Why isn't every single agent in the country at this company?
Mhm.
And, of course, I'm a little bit of a psychopath, like when it comes to research and stuff like that, and wanted to punch holes in it. I'm like, it can't be this good. Pete's got to be missing something. So for the next 11 hours straight, I had two screens going with videos playing on one screen, and I'm Googling shit on the other screen, and I'm going through and literally putting in search terms like what's wrong with eXp, downside to eXp, negatives about eXp. And I went in the next morning, and Pete loves telling this story. I'm wearing the same suit, unshaven. I've been up all night, probably smoked a pack of cigarettes and drank a whole pot of coffee and went in wired. And I think he was even in a meeting at the time. And I was like, get out. And I closed his door and I was like, we need to do this today. So I was still pretty jolted from all the caffeine.
Okay.
And he started laughing. He's like, I told you. And it was, I saw it immediately and didn't want to believe it because I thought it was too good to be true.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are 3.5 years later, and the reality has proven even better than the fantasy that I had of it then. You know what I mean? Then it was just an idea and an expectation. And the reality so far has exceeded that. It's been the smartest business move we ever made.
Yeah. And Chris, I mean, now being with eXp and we've been there for 3.5 years, and I have been called by Chris every week for 3.5 years.
Merciless and relentless follow-up. That's the motto.
Yeah, but you're a friend too, right? And so you were saying, and it's what I learned from Chris, and we'll talk about experiences later, but when you're really excited about something and you want the good for other people and you want them to see what good it is, it's a mindset shift, and it goes, oh shoot, yeah, you're right. And it's not always for the right person, right? We talk about discovery calls and we talk about, hey, this might not be for you, which is fine.
Right.
But for those of you that are there's a certain group where I think it's the unknown that scares people. And I want to do this video because I think this story is just so incredible, and it just shows like real team, down to earth, smart people making smart business decisions, and it's not for anything else. So, well, I appreciate the story. If you guys want to know more, chat with me, chat with Chris, but we'll maybe we'll do another segment here soon, but I appreciate having you on the show.
Anytime. It's my pleasure.
All right.
We're really pumped to have you here. Finally.
Finally is right. All right. Well, thanks, guys. Have a good one.